Here we go. Perfect. So once again, we're with Petra Page-Mann, founder of Fruition Seeds, and she will enlighten us on all sorts of simple seeds to grow in April.
If you insist. I love you, Stacy, and I love you all. But you know that seeds are not as small as they seem, and you know that you are not as small as you seem. And what is a carrot without a garden? And what are we without each other? And I'd also just love to lift up that I'm sure all of you are as exhausted by Zoom as I am, and I invite you to look at the screen and see the rectangle not as just you're in a circle together. Unity together. Even now, and I have you all on gallery view. And thank you for everyone coming. If you feel so moved and so comfortable to be on video, I love seeing your faces and sending love to you, whether you're on video or not. So first, let's share this poem. And perhaps you've heard me read it before. It's one of my favorites, called Joyful. Like a sunflower seed, we are here to more than just survive, but to be broken open, to grow and transform the world in a joyful kind of way. I love this invitation from our dear friend Digger, fellow farmer and poet, as well as activist in the Hudson Valley, and such beautiful words as we are all being broken open by pandemic, broken open by such grief, and broken open by such joy as spring unfurls all around us. So I'd love, love, love to share all of these seeds that you can sow here in April. And there's 10 of them. Oh, wait, I put a few extras in. So there's a lot of seeds that are genuinely easy to grow in April. Wait, let's talk about that easy.
Petra, I think your connection is not good. Petra, I'm having a little bit of a connection problem. I don't know if it's me or
not. My mom told me it was going to be easy to tie my shoes, and she wasn't wrong. But what she knew and so graciously helped me. Oh no.
Your connection is a little wonky.
Yeah, it's happened to me too.
Oh no, I am so
they say
sorry.
If you do the video, you turn off the video.
Yeah,
that's what they do. They make everybody turn off the video.
I'm so sorry, friends.
It's less finicky.
Yeah, let me try turning off the video. And feel free, I'll talk for, and then let me know if it sounds good or not so good. About spinach, we're talking about kale and radish and lettuce and cilantro. Who knew cilantro loves to grow in the cold? Does that make any difference?
It's better for me.
Being off putting. Can you go?
Is it better for other people?
Still a little skippy, but
yes, but if everybody goes on no video, there'll be more better. It'll better.
We'll all go on video.
Well, maybe I will. Matthew is very judiciously making all kinds of adjustments over here to our internet to see what he can approach. So wish us all luck. And in the meantime, thank you for your gracious patience, friends. And yeah, maybe I'll just keep jumping in and let me know if you'd love, if it's still skipping out Oh, I'm so sorry. So first in my lovely stack of seeds to share with you all is snap peas, and great news, snow peas and shell peas. Peas and there are lots of different kinds of peas. There are dwarf compact peas as well as full-size peas, and here's a little fun tip. And so as I go through this lovely litany, this laundry list of seeds,
Petra, I'm so sorry. It's still happening. I don't know what everyone else is hearing, but
Yeah, it's really.
And so you prime.
Petra, we're having a problem hearing you.
So in 10 minutes, within 10 minutes, he thinks it'll be a better scenario. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's not good at all.
And oh, oh, beautiful. Well, friends, let's dive in. Shall I start right from the top? Let's talk about peas. So peas, here's a few things to keep in mind. Number one, yes, they're the harbinger of spring, right along with the birds and the bees coming out. But here's the thing, they have a wide range of temperature zones that they actually germinate in, where there's a bell curve, just like any other bell curve. And at either end of the bell curve, they take longer to germinate. So yes, it's true, you can sow peas as soon as the snow melts and they will survive. They will not rot. It's kind of amazing. They will, however, take much longer to germinate. If the soil is 35 degrees, they might even take 3 weeks to germinate. They will take about 4 days to germinate in 77-degree summer style heat temperature of soil. So it's really, really common, and I always love to just sow some right as soon as I can, but just know that I always weed those peas more than any other pea of the entire season because they take their time germinating. So don't worry if you haven't already, if you sowed peas 3 weeks ago, I love you and you nailed it. You might do a little more reading. I'm right there with you. And we're about to sow our next succession of peas also. So we generally sow one succession right at the beginning when we can first work the soil, and then about a month later. And then peas don't love to grow, they'll germinate, but they don't love to grow in the heat. And so our third succession here in zone 5 at the beginning of August, and we make those compact plants rather than full-size plants. Another key with peas, make sure that you, if you would like, especially if you're planting them in cool soils, prime them. And we prime them by simply putting them in water, warm water, not hot water. It could be cold water. Honestly, tap water cold is totally fine for 1 hour. And that way they're starting to swell, imbibing those waters, getting their enzymes totally moving so that by the time they're in the soil, they're going to germinate that much faster. So a few things to keep in mind with peas. The final thing that I will mention is this. I love to sow both compact and full-size peas at the same time, same day. And here's the thing, it almost doubles the harvest window because the compact peas have quicker days to maturity, right? They don't have as many leaves and they don't grow as vegetatively abundant before they put all of that energy into flowers and fruit. So they flower earlier, and then by the time their flowering and fruiting is tapering off, that's when the full-size peas are just getting into their swing. So planting both compact and full-size peas same day, same time is a really easy way to almost practically double your harvest. So, oh my gosh, there's so much more that I will share, and I'll dig into the rest. There's so much to share. But I do want to mention, if you haven't already seen, a couple of things. We have our webinar library on our website, fruitionseeds.com, and under Learn, you'll see webinar libraries, and you'll see a whole webinar on peas. And there's actually a whole pea growing guide. We've created these beautiful growing guides to share on with lots and lots of different. Here's one for calendula, and it has growing and sowing and seed saving info, and you can print them out or just see them digitally. And if you're not already on our email list, we share them out as we make them on our email list as well. And next, let's talk spinach. So a raise of hands, how many people have planted spinach already? I love it. I love it. Yes. So there's actually so many different other kinds of spinach. There's two primary common types of spinach grown. First is just classic spinach, Spinacia oleracea, and it is so willing and ready to sow in the cold. There's also Asian spinach, tatsoi, ready to sow in the cold, but also the warmth. So here's just a couple keys to keep in mind with spinach. It also, similar to peas, and that's true for everything I'm about to share, it's on that bell curve of optimum germination temperature being generally in the low 70s, upper 70s. And then, but these seeds can be sown in really cold soil, even 38 degrees soil, and still germinate. They just will take several weeks sometimes to germinate if the soil is really cold and really wet. So the awesome thing that I just love to build up is this Asian spinach. Tatsoi is amazing because although it tastes a little bit different, especially if it's stressed, but otherwise we eat it raw, we eat it cooked, and we enjoy it as microgreens in the winter. And then also in our high tunnels, just as cut and come again salad greens in the winter. In spring, it loves to grow. In fall, it loves to grow. Wait, in summer, it loves to grow. What? Because classic spinach, you've probably noticed, if here in zone 5 in the greater Rochester area, if you're sowing spinach around Memorial Day, it's too late and it's going to bolt. It's going to send up that seed stock really early and you won't be harvesting nearly as much abundance. So classic spinach is just a spring and fall phenomena that can easily overwinter. We're actually still eating spinach now from our September sowing, which is amazing. And it'll overwinter uncovered in your fields. But if you want to eat spinach in the summer, Asian spinach is the way to go. So next, let's talk about kale. And so this
real quick, there's a question about spinach. Josephine's spinach didn't come up. She did not buy your seeds, but the seeds she has are old. Is that why? Probably.
That could be a distinct reason. I'm so glad you asked, Josephine, and my heart goes out to you. There's nothing more disappointing than sowing seeds that don't germinate. And I would guess that 3-4-year-old spinach seed should still germinate if you keep them even in as high of technology as your kitchen cupboard. Like certainly in your freezer, they're going to last many years longer. But if they're older than that, then I would guess that it certainly is a germination and just an age issue. And I'm so sorry, but I'm so glad it's not too late to sow spinach. Honestly, we sow spinach until early May. So you've got plenty of time to get fresh seed and to jump right in. And here's a few other kales to keep in mind. So quick shout out. I love these larger overarching patterns in our lives. Well, some of them also break my heart. But here's the thing. Asian spinach is in the brassica family. You'll see Asian spinach and, I can't see the rest of the question on my phone, Lori, but I'm sure.
She wanted to know
what was the other one?
What was the other one?
Classic spinach. So there's actually 3 different varieties of classic spinach on our website. There is butterfly, which is just a classic semi-Savoy classic spinach. There's also giant winter, which you can grow now. It'll grow fabulously. If you're planting in the fall to overwinter, you want giant winter. It is just the most cold hardy spinach we've ever found. And there's also Beaujolais, as in the Beaujolais, the French wine that is red, and it actually has red stems. And so this is a red stem spinach Beaujolais that our friends Brian and Christine of Uprising Seeds in Washington actually selected and shared with us. So it's an extraordinary variety as well. And so this Asian spinach is when you open up the seed packets, and I hope in general that you do this, friends, whenever I sow seeds, I put them in my palm and I love to just admire them. Seeds are so beautiful and so unique. And when you open up any brassica, you know it's a brassica because they're round and they're often dark. And I honestly can't tell the difference between a Brussels sprout seed, a broccoli, and a tatsoi seed, and a seed of kale. They all look identical. And their cotyledons, those first emerging sprouts, also look identical. So as a general rule, brassicas grow really well in the cold. So here's a bunch of beautiful different of those brassicas that you can be sowing now. So here are a few, our most cold hardy kale. So Red Russian is our most cold hardy kale without question. If you're in the fall wanting a kale that will overwinter uncovered in your field, in your garden, that you can harvest from when the snows melt in January and in March and in April, go for the Red Russian. Bare Necessities is also incredibly cold hardy, and I love this. You can perhaps see on my phone, it's more of a feather of a kale than a leaf of kale. And also Vates is best for containers, or otherwise you don't have to grow it in a container. Just know that it is compact. It's like a little dwarf palm of a kale tree. And if you are growing for things like smoothies as well as kale chips, she's also your go-to. So we have other kales too that are delicious and abundant, but not as cold hardy. So other brassicas that are perfect to sow now, arugula. Also, these lovely little pak choys and bok choys. If you're going something larger like a Napa cabbage, we'll talk about soon, those we transplant rather than direct sow. But everything that I'm talking about and everything that I've been talking about and will continue until I say, we're now talking transplanting. These are all perfect to be keeping it simple, super easy, and to be direct sowing. So other brassicas, oh my gosh, who knew radishes are brassica as well? So they're certainly roundish, but they're quite a bit larger than classic brassica seeds, and they're often more brown. And here's the thing that I want to mention about radishes. They love to grow in the cold, which I'm sure you know, but perhaps this blew my mind, and I for years have been experimenting, and I totally believe it. Spiciness is up to you. It's not about the genetics of the radish. It is a response to stress. So a stressed environment radish in its environment is a spicy radish. And what stresses out a radish? I can't imagine that they love neighbors up partying at 3 a.m. But beyond that, they really don't love heat. And they also don't love to be dry. And they don't love to be hungry. But that's generally not an issue because they grow so fast and they don't need too many nutrients. So growing them in warmer weather and keeping them wet, and when they're dry is when you get a spicy radish. So we literally have friends now that love spicy radishes, so they've dialed in how to stress their radishes out so they get the spiciest radishes they can. And our friends that don't love spicy radishes also, with this knowledge, can grow the most tender, sweet radishes that I've ever tasted. And so know that spiciness of the radish is up to you. Another thing to keep in mind with radishes in spring is to make sure you're planting spring radishes. And basically, beyond any variety type, just look at the maturity date. And our seed packets have tons of growing info, all kinds of info, but the days to maturity are right on the front. Yeah, this is our Sora radish and our Davignon, also our spring radishes. You'll see they're like 26 days to maturity, really quick, less than a month. If you look at black Spanish radishes, if you look at watermelon radishes, one of my favorite vegetables of all time, this is 50 days to maturity. It's nearly double. And so these larger, longer day radishes are fall radishes, not spring radishes. And so when you plant them in spring, they're maturing into the heat of summer. And remember, they're so stressed in the heat. So honestly, they don't get large, and they just get spicy and pithy, more fibrous rather than tender and succulent. So just make sure in spring that you're sowing spring radishes rather than large, late day fall radishes. And that's why you'll see on our watermelon radish package, we actually put fall radish right on it to try to set people up for success. One final tip in the radish department: imagine my arm is a row of peas, and we sow our peas every inch along the row. Every 6 inches, we put just a lovely little radish seed of that spring radish. And that way we're harvesting lots of radishes. And by the time that the peas are up and really flourishing, we've already harvested the radishes and they haven't outcompeted each other. So that's a fantastic little interplanting that makes my heart sing. And I hope that it surrounds you with abundance as well. So another brassica, our mescaline mixes are full of glorious brassicas. And specifically, I'd love to lift up this wintergreen mix. Our friend Dan Brisebois up in Montreal has an amazing seed company, Tournesol, and sunflower seeds. And so, but he had like Tournesol is the French word for sunflower, but they have so much more than sunflowers. And he has been developing this wintergreen mescaline mix. That is a variety that grows really quickly in cold temperatures and regrows really quickly in cold temperatures as well. So as a cut and come again salad green, she is one of our go-to. Another one that I'd love to lift up is cilantro. And who knew cilantro loves to grow in the cold? And how many of you have had cilantro that bolts way earlier than you would love it to, right? That's the story of cilantro. And certainly when I was a girl growing up in my father's garden, we only grew cilantro in the summer, and we would succession sow it every 2 weeks because we love cilantro and actually have a consistent supply of cilantro that wasn't actively bolting. We had to plant it really quick in succession. So the nice thing that I blew my mind on this mandala farm in Maine, where I spent a season, it was so, I learned so many things I learned every season that I'm like, thank goodness I now know. But on this farm in Maine, I arrived in March and they were still eating cilantro in their high tunnel. And it was the glossiest, sweetest, most tender cilantro I'd ever eaten in my life. And so now you know, cilantro loves to grow in the cold and will resist bolting more than any other season. So we literally are still harvesting cilantro that we planted in September, even uncovered in our gardens. And certainly I love to imagine my arm is that row of peas again. 6 inches away from that row of pea, I'll plant this like 2-inch band of whether it's winter mescaline mix, arugula, of all kinds of delicious cut and come again, like harvest within 6 weeks kinds of crops, cilantro included. So there's just this row of peas that will be emerging. And there's also this row of cut and come again greens along the side. And it's a beautiful way to kind of optimize a little more of your garden space, whether you grow in gardens or in container gardens.
Petra, Susan would like to know if cilantro requires a special soil pH.
Ooh, not that I know of. I mean, great question. And let's do some homework. To my knowledge, cilantro is fond of just standard garden soil pH. So whether it's 6.2 to 6.5, 6.6, this is the ideal pH range for the vast majority of garden vegetables. So I haven't heard anything differently from cilantro, but I'm wrong all the time in really extraordinary ways and some devastating ones. So let's do some homework. I would love to know, and thank you for asking an astute question. And so April, what other seeds we can direct sow that are easy in April? Let's talk, because those are all the seeds that we can sow before the daffodils are blooming. Once the daffodils are blooming, at that point, the temperature of the soil has risen to the extent that lettuce, cold hardy lettuce, that beets are going to be germinating more quickly. And if you sow them earlier, they'll probably survive, but there'll be like 3+ weeks until they actually emerge and germinate. And another couple of plants that I would love to lift up, these marvelous little flowers as well. So sweet peas, even though they're totally different genus species than peas, you can also plant them as early as your peas. But Phacelia and also poppies and calendula loves to grow in the cold, although you can also establish calendula in August, and she is happy either way. So, but know that if you're especially excited to get calendula in the ground, you totally can. But here I want to just touch for a moment on poppy for just a moment longer, because so many people struggle with poppy. And here is the trick. Poppy loves, it's not a trick. This is just what what we've learned. There's no magic about it. Poppies love to establish in the cold, in cold soil. So similarly to spinach, if you're sowing anywhere close to Memorial Day here in Zone 5, you are simply sowing poppies into too warm of soil. They may not germinate, and they certainly won't celebrate life and vigorously thrive, and probably won't blossom. So you can either direct sow anytime from snow melt, anytime the soil is well drained enough to be planted into, until, for me, I think of early May as like, cut it off, don't even try. So by that second week of May, definitely done. Final call the first week in May. And you can direct sow them. I love to do that, especially if I have a lot of seeds, because when you direct sow in these kinds of capacities, you don't get 100% germination. Not all the seeds will be deep enough, or some will be too deep. If they don't land in just the right place, they don't germinate as fully as they do if you plant them indoors and just very intentionally give them space and the tender, loving care and everything they need. So we actually start them 8 weeks before final frost. So right now, and then we'll be planting them out after we harden them off a month from now, in that like late April, early May window. And that way they'll have plenty of time, a few weeks, to establish in cooler soils. So, oh my gosh, there's so much more to share about poppies. But I just wanted to mention a few flowers in there as well, because we are fed by beauty as well as calories. And I'd love to run through a few other seeds that also you can sow in April, but they are distinctly not as easy. These are all transplant only. Don't bother direct sowing them, please, or do what you love. And there's no better way to learn, but know that these are all ones that we transplant only. So certainly April, early April, final call for onions. Ideally, we've started them in mid-February, even to mid-March is the ideal window for them. So it is final call for ginger, asparagus ginger, your own ginger, as well as onions. But here are some other things that are truly perfect to start right now. So tomatillos, fabulous. Quick note on tomatillos: they don't self-pollinate, so you need at least 2 plants. And also ground cherries, we can start now, as well as cherry tomatoes, slicing tomatoes, any tomatoes you like, go for it, as well as peppers. Now is a perfect time. And we have some wonderful recorded webinars on our website, lifting up all kinds of things that we've already talked about actually, as well, including peppers and including tomatoes. Next week, we'll be dialing in perennial herbs. Every Wednesday, we share Sowing and Growing webinar series. It's totally free, and please join us if you haven't already. So there's eggplant and perennial herbs as well as perennial flowers. Here's oregano as our ambassador of the perennials. And they're small seeds and they take their time germinating. So the more time you give them, 6 to 8 weeks indoors is really ideal. And also broccoli, as well as Chinese cabbage and other kinds of cabbage. Now is a perfect time to be sowing them out, because even though they're a 4-week transplant as opposed to 6-8 weeks like the tomatoes, they are cold tolerant. So we can actually, they love to be put out when it's still frosting, which is a whole other subject. But I just wanted to share these lovely seeds that we also sow in April, but only indoors. And especially, I highly recommend not starting these unless you have a really nice seed starting setup. It's easy to sprout seeds. It's hard to grow a seed to a seedling to a healthy, thriving transplant. And so it takes a lot of tender, loving care. If you don't have a really nice heat mat, if you don't have a really nice grow light, we share these on our website, but they're an investment. And so growing seedlings is totally an investment. To be honest, if we didn't have beautiful greenhouses and dedicate our lives to growing plants and have it be our jobs as well, I would be like, what? You want $4 for a beautiful organic transplant? Done. Because here's the thing, a healthy transplant is so much more abundant compared to a stressed transplant. And so it's absolutely critical that you be really honest with yourself. And you can also send us in pictures of your seedlings and we can help you be honest. Because if your seedlings are stressed and sad, they're going to be not as healthy and thus not as abundant. And thus your gardening is not going to be most likely as satisfying. And of course, it's not just calories and just straight like pounds of food you harvest that is the only, those are not just the only metrics of gauging satisfaction. But I am so honored to share these seeds with you, to surround you with glorious abundance. And whether you've sowed our seeds ever or will ever, I'm happy to share all of this info to surround you with beautiful abundance, as so many seeds and so many teachers have taught me and countless ancestors of both plants and humans before us. So yeah, let's dive into, I'm sure there are other questions. I can keep yammering on all night, and heaven forbid I'm woefully capable of monologues. But Stacy, any questions you'd love to throw in? Let's dive into the Q&A.
I don't have a question. Oh, wait, I do. One just popped up. Do you recommend pinching the tops out of pepper seedlings?
I recommend pinching the flowers off pepper seedlings. So whether it's leaves or you want that apical growth point to keep on being its apical growth point. So I don't recommend pinching it back, kind of how, you know, we pinch off dahlias. Once they're 6 inches tall, we pinch back their apical bud, and that will send energy down and make them more bushy. But honestly, that's in my experience, that's counterproductive for peppers. We do prune tomatoes, which is a whole other subject. But whether it's a pepper, tomato, eggplant, ground cherry, honestly, if it's a marigold, pinch back any flower that you see on any transplant. And that is going to make a huge difference. Let's just talk about Petra projecting on plant psychology. We're here biologically, in strict biological terms, to procreate and create more of ourselves and cycle our nutrients so that other life can build upon our lives. And so life, wants to live and procreate. So these tomatoes for example, that are these peppers that are in a little 4-inch container and have been growing already for 6-8 weeks. And they realize they're in a container and they're hungry and they're realizing, I don't know, I don't see a way out of this little container and there's very finite nutrients here. So I better just put a flower on, and I don't know, it's going to be a real long shot to actually get a fruit and make a seed in the world, but this is my only shot. And not going to throw away my shot, as various people have very famously said. So that psychologically, the plants are stressed for nutrients. Could be water, could be light, all these things, but namely it's nutrients. And so they're throwing their last gasp at making flower. So go ahead and pinch that flower off. And for the next 2 weeks, I like to let those plants just focus on growing more leaves and growing their roots and actually making their own nutrients by photosynthesizing and accessing more nutrients in their roots. And that way you're really encouraging the plant to be much more vegetatively focused, that then by the time they start to flower and fruit more appropriately for their bell curve of life, then they're going to have surround you with way more abundance. So perhaps that answered your question with a little extra.
Oh, here's another question for you, Petra.
Good.
Jane wants to know, will one grow light be light enough for, and it just popped down the list of questions. Will one grow light be light enough for a tray of seedlings? How much light do you need for the seedlings?
Yeah, so we have 17-inch lights, and those 17-inch lights are perfect for one single tray. And with those, with seedlings, you want with our LED lights, every kind of grow light will have a little different recommendation. 6 inches, hovering 6 inches above the uppermost foliage of your seedlings is ideal for our lights. Other lights will have different recommendations, so follow their recommendations. But yeah, one 17-inch light is perfect for one tray. We also have 33-inch lights that are perfect for 3.
Thanks, Petra.
Yeah, thank you. Happy growing.
I have another question from Lori. She's curious about milkweed plants. She wants to be able to attract monarch butterflies.
Lori, I love you, and I love monarchs and milkweed too. And here are some tips for growing milkweed. So you can actually start them from seed. They're pretty challenging. You can also transplant milkweed, and soon is going to be an ideal time. So if you know already of an area that has abundant milkweed, think like 300 plants or more. You can bring a shovel and just early spring, when you start to see them emerging, go ahead, they spread by seeds. They really spread by rhizomes. So they spread by seeds to disperse to new territory. But when they land, they start to send out these extensive root systems that then allow milkweed to just pop up and pop up and pop up. And that's why you often see them in clumps. And that's why we never recommend growing milkweed in your vegetable garden. So you can simply transplant them too. Keep in mind, if you're starting them from seed, that they're wild seeds. And as a general rule with wild seeds, you want to grow them as wildly as you can. And so certainly don't start any seeds in egg cartons, but I don't even recommend growing them in cell trays or other kind of containers. If you have soil blockers, which are just amazing. Oh my gosh, I think I have one close by. Yes. So soil blockers are wonderful, and they allow you to make these. They look like fudge, graving pieces of fudge. And when roots get to the edge of those, they literally turn around the other way, just like roots have evolved for millions of years to do when they hit the air, instead of getting root bound. And so milkweed especially, she kind of loves to send down a deep, fast root. And if she can't do that, if she's contained in any way, she's like, gosh, this isn't what I signed up for. And it's really stressful. And a lot of wild seeds also need to be cold stratified. With Fruition's organic seeds, our milkweed, we actually stratify them for you. So stratification sometimes just looks like coldness. So we literally keep them in the freezer for 3 months before we share them. And then magically, or less magically, well, there's plenty of magic as well as the science, and they can coexist and do beautifully. And so those 3 months mimics winter. And so they go literally, when we harvest in the fall, we always just germination test just to see. And it might be 15% germination. It's always a bit. And then once after we bring them out of 3 months in the freezer, that's when we have 80, 90+% germination. So they really need those cold to mimic the winter. Another facet of it is this, and we found that our seeds, our milkweed seeds, still germinate really well regardless. So we don't do this, but you totally can cold stratify it by additionally mimicking spring. So once you get it in the freezer for 3 months, and ideally it's probably arriving to you that way, you actually put them in a plastic bag closed with it encased in a moist paper towel. And that way, and you put them in the fridge. And that way it's kind of like an elongated spring. So 4 or 5 weeks in your fridge with a moist paper towel is simulating that like warm, cold, warm, and just those conditions that then allow them to stimulate and break open. So we found that isn't, it doesn't dramatically increase the germination rate of our seeds. But if you don't know if they've been cold stratified or not, I would definitely recommend doing that with milkweed too.
Petra, I want to see inside your refrigerator. Oh gosh. I have a question for you, Doll. So the radish heat I find very interesting. So does this also pertain to onions or garlic and the heat from different, peppers? I mean, what's going on with that?
A lot of those other things are more genetic. Great question. I love you, Judy. Yeah, so onions, if you don't want heat and onions, simply grow like those big Vidalia Walla Walla style, the sweet onions. Those have been selected for generations to be more sweet, to have less of those sulfur compounds that translate into the spice and the heat. So the like yellow cooking onions have the most. There are the red onions that some are sweet, but some also have a lot of pungency. They have a great, so as you're getting those seeds, it should say on them. But generally, and also check out, we have a whole, on our webinar library on our website, we have a whole sowing and growing webinar series that we did just on onions, and that has our growing guide on onions. And part of our growing guide is not just how to sow and grow them, but it talks about the types. And so it really breaks down all the different onion types. It's quite a menagerie. And same thing with peppers. I haven't found, there are some varieties that I feel like the hotter they are, if it's a hot pepper, that sometimes there's environmental things that seem like they might make them hotter, but I found it really variable. And so I feel like, I don't know for sure, but I feel like with peppers, heat is also more genetically selected than culturally affected. What a fabulous question. And maybe we should find out, in August over dinner sometime. Maybe we can all make a huge potluck and be like, here's the table of food that wasn't stressed. How does that taste? And here's the table of food that was. And maybe I'm just hungry for potlucks and humans.
That's great. Thank you. But Lori wants to know if we can do another quick one. What can she plant on her trellis after the peas?
Oh my gosh, what can you plant on a trellis after peas? Lori, this is a delicious question, and I'm not going to pretend I have not had this experience in my life. So I'm totally dream world garden planning, dreaming with you right now. So garden peas, if you're trellising them full size on an arbor, they're going to be, 5-6 feet. They're full size peas. So they're going to mature later. You're probably not going to be pulling them out until mid-July, maybe even the 3rd week in July. So at that point, there's, gosh, I mean, you could plant pole beans, but pole beans generally take a lot longer their days to maturity are longer than bush beans. So I'm sure you would get some bush beans, but I'm also sure you wouldn't get a ton. And yeah, morning glories too. I imagine similarly, you will enjoy a few flowers, but I'm not sure. I mean, it'll take them 5-6 weeks to start flowering. So at that point, they're going to be blossoming into September, which is really special, but might also, there'll be probably 5 or 6 weeks of, beautiful green heart-shaped leaves. How disappointing, because you wanted the flowers, but honestly, that sounds really beautiful too. So yeah, what a wonderful question. And thank you. I'm excited to experiment, and let me know what you succession sow on your arbors after your peas. I can't wait to hear more.
So Petra, if people don't get their questions answered tonight, they can always go to your website, right? And ask questions.
Yeah, totally. Our website is a perfect way. And I can't wait to hear. Curious gardeners are the best gardeners, and it's such a joy to share these times together, and these Q&As are just so delightful. And thanks again to the Greater Rochester Libraries for making these conversations abundant and so possible. And thank you again for bearing with me in a momentary lapse of technological capacity.
No worries. So next month, Petra's going to be back with 10 easy seeds to sow in May. Oddly enough, right? Who would have thunk? Wow, April's just whizzing by here. So if anyone doesn't have any more questions, I guess we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Petra.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for your wonderful questions. And yeah, don't be shy. Gardens are deceptively easy to grow, and it's so easy to plant seeds. It's much harder to grow them and to be joyfully weeding them together months from now. And know that we are here not just to share seeds with you, and not just to share, how to grow in the spring, but all season long and all the seasons. We are here with you, friends. So sending love from our gardens to yours, and don't be shy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.